So the way that we are going to be painting is we're only going to be looking at a black and white photograph, and you only focused on your values. So instead of thinking about what color is this, what color is this, you're thinking, is this a highlight? Is this a midtone? Or is this a shadow? When you're thinking this way, everything just becomes so much easier for you when it comes to painting. And it doesn't matter if you have darker skin or if you have lighter skin. The only thing that we're focusing on is not color. We're thinking on value, right? So we have lighter values here, and we have some more darker values in this area. Then we only have to focus on that. So the way that we are going to be painting is using this mindset of thinking about values first only. When you're creating your underpainting, the thing that you want to achieve is you want to get highlights, midtones, and shadows as your primary focus for creating realism in your piece. And how you do that is on your painting palette. Let's say that this is your painting palette. You're gonna make your palette in a way that's easy for you to figure out what is gonna be your highlight values, which might be a range in here, your midtone values in that range, and your shadow values in this range. So what would that look like? Let's say that we are using burnt umber. In order to create a value scale, you can either add white or black. This will make it lighter and it will make it darker without actually changing the pigment of the color. So why don't we do this instead? Why don't we do red, Cad Red Light, that we would be using a lot in this course. Cad Red Light straight out of the tube would be like right in the middle. And then if you add white to this, it's gonna get lighter in value. And then if you add black to it, it's gonna get darker in value. How are you going to take this paint palette that you just mixed up, and where are you going to put it onto your piece? So when I'm painting my underpainting, the very first layer of painting, I still add glaze as I'm doing this. Like I'll take some gloss glazing liquid and I will put it like right here, like just like a little gloss glazing blob right here. I take a little bit of color. So I always start with my darkest values first and then work my way up the scale when I'm doing my first step of the underpainting. If I want to paint her, then what I would do is take my darkest value first, take a little bit of paint, maybe put it over here. Then I'm going to take a little bit of glaze and add it. So I'm going to take that dark value red, and then I'm just going to add it to the parts of the piece that need like the darkest value. So I'm just going to block it in with my paintbrush and put dark values in, dark values all the way around. Then when I'm done with that, I'm going to just work my way up and find my midtone values and midtone values. And it's gonna look pretty patchy for a while, but eventually these are gonna connect together. And this is what I like to call is like steps up. When these steps start connecting to each other or start laying next to each other, what happens is you start to get a gradient. So if you're not familiar with what a gradient is, it is when light transitions from either dark to light seamlessly, where you're getting that effect of like dark to light, but there's no harsh line in between like that. This isn't a gradient. But how do we create a painting where we can create a very gradual transition between dark to light values? The first layer of your underpainting is gonna look more like this. It's gonna be very blotchy, it's gonna be pretty weird looking. Kind of like you see here, it's nothing smooth, it's very patchy, it's very rough. I kind of pat all of it in. And then after I let that whole thing dry, after I do my first pass over the entire underpainting, and it's blotchy, it's rough, it's kind of in that ugly phase, you let the whole thing dry. But the next time I go over it, I would use a little bit more glaze added to my paint. When it's more opaque, you can't see that paper, that whiteness of the paper underneath. But when you add a glaze to it, and really this is our secret weapon, it's the gloss glazing liquid right here. When you add glaze to your paint pigment, it can become more and more transparent. When it becomes more and more transparent, that means that you can make certain areas have a little bit of color onto it. Certain areas can have a lot more pigment to it and look darker, because even though this is the same color, this appears darker because it's more opaque. This appears lighter because it's more transparent. And then I would go over the areas again that are super patchy and try to smooth it out by just adding a little bit more glaze. And then what you're gonna do is just lay it right on top of this middle part right here and just blend it. Kind of lay it down and it'll create like a nice transition in between. Like you're just refining then. And if you don't believe me, check this out. So these are those like transparencies you can put like they're like dividers, they're clear plastic. I like to think of this as like a clear layer of gloss glazing liquid with no pigment added to it. If you add one layer of gloss glazing liquid with no pigment to it, it doesn't really do that much, right? You're just seeing straight through it to it. But if you let that layer dry and you add another layer on top of it, what's gonna happen is every time you let that layer dry and you add a new layer on top, let that layer dry, add a new layer on top. This is just clear gloss glazing liquid with nothing else added to it, no other color added to it. What starts to happen? So what starts to happen is all of those little harsh lines, even though this is colored pencil, it starts smoothing out. I like to use a smaller paintbrush. I use a round brush or a really small filbert brush and start to just blend out all the hard areas without losing any of the highlights. If there is a highlight here, maybe just add a little bit more gloss glazing liquid. Take a little bit of paint to make it smoother looking without losing that highlight. Does that make sense to you? There's a lot of really natural highlights going on here. They're very subtle. Like there's a highlight here and there's a highlight here and here, but it looks really real. If I just add a few more layers of gloss on top of it, you can still see those highlights. You tend to get more realism when you're not smoothing all of those subtle highlights out completely with more color. You get more realism if you just add a transparent layer of glaze and just make it look smoother by adding the glaze on top of it to give you that glowy effect. That's why when you're doing your first pass of your underpainting, you don't have to worry about it being patchy. Really, realism happens kind of in those middle values, and you can achieve that after a while once you add more glazing on it, even if you didn't add any color pigment to it at all. You would get your portrait painting to a point where this looks super realistic and refined and detailed, very similar to your black and white photograph. You're gonna get it to a point where everything looks very close to done, but only in one value scale. So whether you're using this value scale to create your entire underpainting or you're using this value scale to create your entire underpainting, it doesn't matter what the color is, as long as you have light to dark and opaque to transparent. If you have all of those elements, you can create an entire realistic painting that looks like this. That is going to be the majority of your work. When you're done with this, the only thing you have to do at the very end is start playing with this. What is this? This is just super simple primary colors. And how would your primary colors look when they are laid on top of each other like this?